Well, it's really good to be here this afternoon. I am Dr. Cordula Robinson, and I'm from Northeastern University. We have 5 satellite campuses, so while we're based in Boston mostly, we also have a campus in Toronto. Come and visit us. Silicon Valley, North Carolina, Seattle, and of course Boston, as well as a number of research colleges. So we're really into AI at Northeastern. It's a big thing. Our president, Ayoun, he talks about robot-proof education and wrote a book and really emphasizes for all faculty that we need to keep education relevant in the age of AI. And one of the things is, what is it going to do to jobs, and what might job forecasts look like? So I'm curious what you might expect could be the new wave of jobs in the future. And to start off, I would say perhaps we'll see jobs like data detective or ethics control officer. So what are your thoughts on that? Jobs for the future in AI.
I think that a lot of people worry about the impact of automation or robotic automation on the ability to complete work. And in fact, that's been going on for hundreds of years. We began with horses, we automated transportation with the internal combustion engine. That has continued on to present day. And to me, jobs are actually comprised of skills, and skills have life cycles. They come in out of demand, and they go out of demand based on changing market conditions. And I don't think it's going to be different with AI, to be perfectly honest. I think that as new skills are demanded, as new technology comes to market, as new understanding of data manipulation and data behavior comes on, new skills will be demanded. And those will form new jobs. Yeah. I would say that in 5 years from now, we won't even know. We can't predict because 5 years ago, some of the jobs that are in demand today didn't exist. I think it'll change things for the better.
Yeah. First of all, awesome to be here. This is great. It's fun as a physician to get to talk about this kind of thing and not have people roll their eyes at you. I would say that our job is to take care of ill and injured children. And there is a generation of providers that recognize that we don't have the capacity to do that as well as we would like to in real time, all the time. And what artificial intelligence allows us is it can augment us and get us to that point where we're happy in the care we're providing. So I don't think of it at the front lines as necessarily replacing anyone, but I think the job will transition and people will feel more comfortable with the job because of how they're augmented to perform it. Now, certainly there are going to be new roles pop up in healthcare, but I think from the physician and from the provider perspective, we're looking forward to that augmentation and being able to do a better job as opposed to a different job.
I mean, I'll agree with it changes jobs, right? It doesn't replace them. Yes, there's unemployment levels sometimes in some places higher than they have been before, but we've got many more people than we have before. Telephone operators, that was a job once upon a time. Personally, I'm looking forward to being able to do my job better and more effective and more efficient, to hopefully have more time to do the stuff that is added value or better value.
Yeah, I just wanted to cut to the chase there because I think, you know, a lot of people, they hear AI and it's like robots are going to come and take over the world and we won't have anything left to do. And I don't agree with that. I see AI as being a very powerful tool. It's still a singular, you know, it's got pretty singular tasks still, not multitasking, and it will hopefully create a new wave of inspiration and job markets and the way we can synergize and communicate with each other. But we're really fortunate and blessed to be here today with people from distinct experts from 3 different backgrounds. We have Sid here who's in communications, and we have Cameron who is in enterprise business, and then we have Jason who's in healthcare. So given your differing backgrounds, maybe I can ask the first question in a completely different way, which is, what actually does AI mean to you?
Well, so I've got a bit of a funny opinion on this, mainly because, so some people like to claim what we're doing is AI. Now, some people also call what we're doing as chatbots. Now, personally, I don't like them. They're not AI. People seem to think that AI is somehow this magical thing that you can just plug in that changes everything. Things have to be trained. And you have the whole, whether it's issues with facial recognition technology, right, where it all depends on the data that it's trained by. We as humans have been trained over our lives based off data that has gone into us through our senses. That is how we have learned to become what we are today. Now, a machine just has it can process data much quicker. So it can access more information, but it still depends on the data that it's given, which means that we have the massive issue of biases. And so Mercedes, with their self-driving car, have claimed that, it will do whatever it can to avoid killing the driver. Now, it's a massive biased system. So it all kind of depends on what data you feed it, and I think that it's not at all what most people seem to think it is. We were chatting earlier very briefly about Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant, and if they're an AI or if they're not. My personal opinion is that they're not. My personal opinion is that actually it's very rule-based still. It's a decision tree, and it's lots of if statements. We haven't got how just yet. Do I think we're ever going to get how? Honestly, I don't think we are, but I would love to be proven wrong. My closest to being near AI, the film Ex Machina, or some people call it other words, Ex Machina, or whatever you want to pronounce it. I made a prop for that film. So that was the closest I've ever got to AI, in my opinion, a film. And yet what we're doing, everyone is calling AI.
The way we look at it kind of right now, in the moment and in the near term, is we think a lot about prediction and the ability to predict. And so I'll give you a very concrete example. We know that a certain number of patients come to our emergency department, and we know that they're going to come back to our emergency department within 72 hours because they need some additional reassurance. Not because they're going to need another test or they're going to need us to do anything else for them, but just for reassurance. So how can we apply artificial intelligence to that? So we're going to take a lot of data, and we're going to create some algorithms, and we're going to try to predict when that initial visit happens, who is most apt to come back and see us again. And then we're going to preemptively reach out to them and save that family from coming back to the hospital unnecessarily. A very patient-focused application of AI and prediction. So that's kind of how we're defining it right now, until we have droids that can show us around the hospital.
I see artificial intelligence as a complex system of inputs and outputs that attempts to approximate human behavior based on cognitive models of cognition. And as you were saying, Sid, the model is the key word there, because we are still building those models of human behavior in order to execute these algorithms to improve efficiency. And because of the complexity of human behavior, I'm not sure we'll ever get to the how that completely covers all realms of human behavior. At Salesforce, what we're trying to do is automate tasks using artificial intelligence and machine learning to augment the capabilities of people to better engage with their customers. So whether you're working with business customers, whether you're working with consumer customers, you're marketing to them and you're trying to influence their behavior. You're selling to them, you're trying to influence their behavior. You're providing customer service, you're trying to resolve their frustrated behavior. All of those things lend them to models that can improve the selling, the servicing, and the marketing of the interactions with those humans. And that's where our focus is on artificial intelligence.
So you've all emphasized the idea of automation and scope for improvement. So when you were talking about the bots, I was thinking, yeah, you know, like I live in America now, but if I'm on the phone talking with an automated system, it doesn't recognize my accent. So I have to go to the button option. And that's presumably because it's not machine learned or expecting that there's going to be a Yorkshire woman on the end of the phone in Boston. So what do you think then the difference is between machine learning and AI, or the need for constant improvement and the risk of deep learning?
It's the data that it's trained on, right?
Yeah.
So also because, so I think probably the majority of us work in technology, right? That's why we're here. And how many times does technology work how we want it to? Like, I think we are very bad at managing expectations. Like, if I said to you I was going to give you a robot, you would expect C-3PO or R2-D2 or some form of droid that walks around the house. And then if I gave you a Roomba, then you'd be pretty disappointed. Something that just bumps into the walls. However, if I said to you I was going to give you a Hoover, and then I gave you a Roomba, you'd actually be quite excited, because it's a tool, it's something that solves a problem for you. It's like the, so with our stuff, so we're processing millions of messages often between consumers and companies. And what we're finding, the majority of them are actually button-based. And the reason for that is that pressing buttons on mobile is far easier than typing. Yeah. And you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to get a task completed. So if that is, well, my classic example is when you're trying to get money out of the bank. You want your money. That's your problem. How do you solve that? Yeah. Do you press a few buttons, or do you want to speak to a human? You don't want to speak to a human. You want to you want it to be done as quickly and most effective. And I mean, yeah, that's where I think these things are actually super powerful, because it's for us, for what we do, it's very different to what you do, where it's analyzing trends, etc. It's a communications channel, and it's a very powerful communications channel, and it means that you don't have to have a human at the end of it. Yeah. Does that answer?
It addresses.
I just want to pick up on the data piece and why I'm so optimistic. So I think everybody would agree that healthcare medicine is very, very ripe for disruption. And one of the things that makes us so optimistic around machine learning and AI is that we have these big troves of data that are kind of sitting there. They're like kindling waiting to explode. And a great example are all these biobanks, you know, genetic banks of material and everything we need to know about an individual, just waiting for the right algorithms to make sense of them, to find patterns, and then to provide precision care. And so you don't want to oversell things, but I think when the data is sitting there, I mean, you can't help but be filled with optimism that when the hardware and software and when our thinking catches up, we're going to have a real opportunity to do something special.
I see machine learning as a subset of AI, specifically. Machine learning to me is being able to capture a large volume of inputs and use it to either classify or predict, usually one, maybe a couple of outputs. But artificial intelligence is large volumes of inputs contributing to many potential large volumes of outputs, and that's a different problem to solve. Not to say that one is any more value or less value than the other, it's just a different problem and it's a subset. We see machine learning as steps towards getting towards the concept of artificial intelligence. And it's regardless of whether you're using it, the data to classify objects for categorization or classification, or whether you're using it to make a predictive analysis. I also think there's two domains to it as well, what I call visible AI or non-visible AI. And most of us are familiar with visible AI. That's when we directly interact with something that we can provide multiple inputs to, and it can provide multiple outs to us as well. So I'll use Siri or Alexa as an example. Regardless of whether it is me or Jason or Sid who asks the same device a question, regardless of the different input, it can come up with multiple different outputs depending on whoever's asking it. That's visible AI. Non-visible AI is the algorithms that are going on behind the scenes that you never see, that you've been interacting with for years. So for example, we have in our Salesforce Commerce Cloud, which is an e-commerce engine, the ability to be able to make product recommendations based on what other people have purchased or what sentiment analysis has detected this person may be interested in this. If I buy these pair of Adidas sneakers, it's possible I may want the matching pair of shorts that go along with it. Something like that. That's been going on in the background for many, many years. We don't necessarily see it, but it is AI algorithms that are influencing our behavior, in that case, shopping behavior.
I've got a question on the visible AI. So I think that, so your definition of the invisible AI is my personal definition of AI as a whole. So the visible AI, so would you define Clippy as AI? So back many years ago, we would have a thing that it would pop up and suggest things to us as we were doing things. Now, that's, in my opinion, isn't the only difference between that and Siri, is that it's voice triggered.
That was a while ago. Paperclip. I suppose in its basic format, it was trying to make rules-based decisions to try and answer a question that you were asking. Do I think it had any predictive ability? Not in the same sense of how predictive algorithms behave today, right? More of a rules-based decision tree, as opposed to let me determine based on the variance of the data set what is the most likely indicator of this variable. And I don't remember that it ever worked very well either.
Oh, I mean, certainly wasn't saying it was working well, but it did come up with like, I think you're trying to save a document. Like there was, and yeah, for sure. I mean, it wasn't very good at doing its suggestions, but I think that's where kind of we have machines that are assistants, right? And we have ultimately all machines are assistants. Like once upon a time we didn't have computers, then we got computers, and it meant we could do more things. Like it's you could, in some senses, describe any machine as some form of AI. I think when it takes trends and it analyzes data, right, and it suggests it does the job of a human but at scale. I guess that's where I'm probably contradicting myself. I find it there's a nuance somewhere, which is that we've been using machines to solve problems forever, and is that the definition of AI? I don't think so. Yeah. Sorry, thinking out loud.
Does it mean, could AI mean it's an automated process that no longer needs the human will be on the end result and might benefit from it, and it might augment the human condition or the human need, but could it refer to the automation of the tasks so that a human doesn't have to dredge through copious amounts and volumes of data?
Yeah, I think that's where we see the real benefit in medicine. And I can give you a great example that I think will resonate with people. So when you come into the emergency department and your child has a fever and a cough and we're worried about pneumonia and we order an x-ray, the physician or any provider is focused on looking for whether or not there's pneumonia. And in the same time they're doing that, they're being interrupted by different people and there's lots of competing priorities. But what we'd like to see is a system that runs in the background that looks for signs of non-accidental or trauma or child abuse and can pick that up, because the provider is focused on the x-ray and what they're looking for, and they may overlook another sign of something serious. So that kind of non-visible opportunity, I think, is there. And to have those kind of systems running is very powerful. Especially in healthcare, where we really covet quality and safety.
I think we've been doing process automation for years. I mean, the assembly line of the car is an automation of a process. That's not artificial intelligence. To me, the distinction is when you are attempting to model human behavior, right, or influence human behavior. That's where it begins to simulate human cognition, and that's where it becomes artificial intelligence and stops becoming just process automation.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So there's a lot that's been discussed, and in the discussion, I'm remembering AI is like 62 years old. It's seen like deaths and growths. It's seen, times where it hasn't been funded, and now it's all the rage. So now we have to ask, well, why is it all the rage now? And I think a little bit of that has to do with data. So since AI also has a bit of a manic image, on the one hand, it can simplify and augment and facilitate and help. On the other hand, it can be a bit threatening and alarming, and people have images of robots taking over the world. But then there's also data, and that's the other real sensitive issue. So who owns this data that you're using? What are your perceptions?
So I have a very specific perspective on that from the Salesforce side. At Salesforce, we believe that we do not own any customer data. Our customers choose to store their data and use applications. They choose to store it with us and use them to run applications. That is the customer's data. And we actually don't even have any way to be able to see that customer data. There's no one person anywhere inside of Salesforce that can independently see a customer's data. We don't own it, they own it. It is their data. And it is up to the customer to be able to work with that data on behalf of their consumers and their customers. Which presents a very interesting challenge when you're trying to architect AI systems at scale for infinite possibilities. To me, if you are not paying for a service that is advocating AI capabilities based on data you're providing it, then you don't own that data, they do. But if you are providing or you're paying for that service for capabilities that you want to do, then that data should be yours, and all yours.
I think it kind of comes from, 5 years ago, the hot topic was big data.
Yeah.
Right, so let's store everything.
Yeah.
Let's store everything. Now, we've stored all of this stuff, so we've got no idea what to do with it. But then we also, I'm English, in case you couldn't tell. And in Europe, we've got GDPR.
Yeah.
Now,
that's my next question.
I'm a bit of a privacy nut. I used to help out Mozilla many years back. I think that we as consumers, when it's our information that we have provided, we should know what is happening to our information. And that's where I am a big GDPR fan. Yes, it's been a ball ache for us on a systems perspective, and yes, no one really understands what the rules are, and who knows what will happen. Facebook have got a $8 billion potential fine against them at the moment. I think everyone is now just sat waiting, right? And from when I was in America 2 weeks ago, it was clear that no one was taking it seriously. Now, I don't know if that's the same over here in Toronto. In Europe, in London, we're all taking it super seriously. Now, maybe we've taken it too seriously if Facebook doesn't have this $8 billion fine. Because obviously, you've got the whole, well, I'm not going to do what the Europeans tell me to do. In the same way that we wouldn't do what you guys told us to do. But it will be interesting to see what happens with that. Anyway, my ramble was I believe that the data belongs to whoever that data is about. I'm interested, especially on a medical perspective, right? That's kind of a big issue. Whose data is that?
Yeah, and I think we take that very, very seriously. But there's this interesting role, I think, for transparency, because when you really talk to people, they want their data to be used, by and large, the majority, in order to be used for research and development, in order for us to push medicine forward. And so I think if we're transparent about what we're doing, if we keep people informed, I think that's really the key, almost more so than ownership. I think people are less interested in ownership than making sure that their privacy is kept and that they know what's being done.
So we're an American company. Our headquarters is in the US, and we're taking it pretty darn seriously, I can tell you that. Not only because we have operations across the world and in the European Union, but because it's the right thing to do. there is a glaring lack of a national or federal privacy law in the U.S. And GDPR, for most enterprises, is a real pain. It's a real tough thing to tackle, and there's a lot of confusion around it. We're trying to meet that head on by providing learning modules in our online learning system Trailhead to help with that. But the right to be forgotten has presented certain challenges because what we discovered is, yes, the legislation says you must provide a way for that provider to forget or release all of your data, but it also came with the desire to be remembered. And that presents a specific technical challenge. If I say to a provider or holder of data, I want you to forget everything about me as though I never existed, they must do that. But at some point I might say, you know what, actually, I've changed my mind. I've bought something else and I need you to know about the other things that I've bought as well. I'd like you to remember me. And so now I have to provide the right to be remembered. So that has actually been an engineering challenge that our teams have been, that spent about a year on to address that compliance, because that use case happens more often than you realize. So it has been a significant challenge to us. I think the real impact of GDPR is going to be really interesting, though, because I think what's going to happen is it's going to force companies to be better at engaging with their customers. I'll give you an example. I bought a car stereo from Crutchfield about a couple months ago. It was Crutchfield in the US. And now I get ads almost daily from Crutchfield for car stereos. And I said, guess what? I have one. I don't need more car stereos. I only have one car that I need a stereo for. So guess what? Unsubscribe. So now I've said, you've given me a bad consumer experience. It's not relevant to me. It's not targeted to me. So forget me. Forget me. Forget I ever existed. I don't need support right now. I don't need to know this. I don't want you sending me any stuff. But what happens if I have a warranty claim with my car stereo that I bought? Now I want you to remember all the stuff that you forgot about me because I need help with it, right? So different specific challenge. I think it's going to force customers or providers of data or holders of data to be better at engaging their customers so that you don't get that unsubscribe use case.
That will also be their shit AI recommendation engine, right? On the fact that you bought a stereo. So people who have bought that stereo have also bought other stereos.
I never checked it out if it's us or not.
But then that's also like recommendation engines, right? We've had them forever. Now that they're all algorithmic. I mean, and it's all the again, biased data. My favorite recommendation engine is Discover Weekly on Spotify. Now, what I love about how they do it is that it's actually curated, right? It's personalized curation, because it just takes, you like this song is on this playlist created by this person, you might like this song in that playlist. Fake AI is the best.
So, that was my next question. What do you think of GDPR? But I think in America, Facebook might say, well, it's the First Amendment and freedom of speech. But I think there's also a cognizance in America that Facebook, Google, maybe Amazon haven't respected privacy as much as perhaps Apple. And so irrespective GDPR and the idea of opting in, not opting out, it all should be on people's minds in order to, for the ordinary person as well, to set their preferences and say what it is they prefer and that privacy matters and so on and so forth. And the other interesting thing that that you said, Cameron, is, on the one hand, we want privacy, but on the other hand, we want to be remembered too. And the same person who may want privacy might think, well, that system's stupid. Why didn't it remember me? Can't it do anything? So we're living all together in this new world. For me, when I do AI, the need was pushed that I use satellite images and drone data and do a lot of computer vision and machine learning. But if we have 8 million images, we can't have 8 million people to look at them. So Instead, we extract this information using automated processes or classifications and decision trees and so on to try and mimic the human in certain areas. But that's a whole different type of data too. So where do you think we're going to go? What do you think are the next real considerations for AI, knowing that it is such a kind of, there's a lot of ethics surrounding it, or a new wave of ethics that might be coming up that have to do with data and have to do with privacy. What do you think are the next set of things that we are prudent to think of over the next years in terms of reconciling this new, powerful existence with AI?
Ethics for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so recently at Google I/O, they demoed their appointment booking robot who called, right? Google Assistant called someone up, and it sounded like it was a human, and it was a human responding to a human. Now, obviously, it was trained on that specific conversation pretty strongly. But you've got when was it? Yeah, 5-6 years ago, Facebook had their platform so that, yeah, you can take your friends with you to other systems so that you didn't have to start again from scratch, which is an open data fan. Good idea. Yes, it's then been used for nefarious ways. Google then, within weeks, announced the fact that you can now have a robot that sounds like it's a human speaking to a human. In the UK, we have huge issues of Microsoft support. So what I mean by that is everyone getting called by a call center pretending to be Microsoft support and getting money from them.
Yes.
Like it's...
Scams.
Yeah, massive scams, right? I mean, I know 5 non-technical people who have been scammed by that. Now, I just can't imagine. I think we need to be careful. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mentioned earlier a film, Real Genius. If you haven't watched Real Genius, early Val Kilmer, make sure you do. He creates a laser because he wants to create a laser. He didn't realize that laser was going to be the world's most powerful weapon, but he wanted to create this super powerful laser because it was cool. And like, there's a whole, it's like the 80s reminiscing about the future in ways that they didn't realize what they were doing. It's a great film on, like, yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for us, definitely ethics will be a big, big question. But I think I'm encouraged by the fact that for a long time I worried that our institutions and society wasn't really up for the challenge. But I think there's enough awareness. I think we've become nimble enough that we'll be able to meet some of these ethical dilemmas kind of in a timeliness that's appropriate. What I worry about a little bit more from the medicine side is around validation. So. And what's really the gold standard we measure artificial intelligence against. So, for example, there's no question that for a long time we've just relied on human intuition, human skill to make a lot of these critical decisions for us in medicine, and we know we don't always do a good job. So potentially a system could do a much better job of that, but it could still make mistakes. And so how are we going to measure and validate against a flawed system to begin with? And we have this concern and this question come up in finding gold standards all the time in research, but this seems like the ultimate gold standard. And so I'm not sure we've really wrapped our heads around that yet, how we'll do that. But again, I'm confident we have a lot of smart people thinking about what we're gonna do next. So it's gonna be a fun next 5-10 years, there's no question about that.
So we have a philosophy at Salesforce that it's important to do well, but it's equally important to do good. And that is based on one of our core corporate values, the number one value, which is trust. And we believe we must have trust, not only with each other as employees, but as customers, and really as humanity. And what this has influenced us to do is, in the absence of any legal frameworks or jurisdictional frameworks that govern it as such, we've taken the initiative to advance ethics in artificial intelligence, right? So for example, and I think we're going to see more of this as more holders and providers of data that can be used in AI are going to recognize the same kind of thing. We actually use the business tools available to us today, contracts, license agreements, et cetera, to specifically specify that you may not use our AI capabilities to do bad things, like to discriminate against people based on gender or race or other factors. It's literally written into the license agreements. If you're going to use our AI capabilities, you cannot do them for bad things. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as people realize, again, what we're doing is modeling human behavior, and that human behavior must be a force of good, not a force for evil. And that's the way we're proceeding.
That's awesome.
How would people enforce that? So, like, Google have we heard earlier, right? They've just stopped Maven, their AI project, from being used for weapons. Like, I don't know how people intend to be able to enforce any of that, because ultimately, if I have access to Maven, I will absolutely if I'm building something for weapons, which I'm not, by the way, I would absolutely put down, I'm creating some form of face mask for Snapchat, like, whatever they're called. You could easily claim you're doing something else, but using it for nefarious reasons. And I don't know how to solve that problem.
Isn't that where the next wave of jobs will come in, like ethics control officer or AI lawyer, AI psychologist, for when people have been robbed of something that wasn't really allowed, or it's a whole new playground and battlefield. I think it's a lot's to be determined.
I think again it comes down to trust, right? When you negotiate an agreement with another company, it is an agreement that is defining trust between the two organizations. You will do this, we will do that. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody is going to step beyond the bounds of those trust arrangements. If you look at enterprise software historically, somebody buys licenses for 10 databases and installs it on 50, and the vendor never knows, right? It happened all the time, but that violates the agreement, it violates that trust, but people will still do it. The point is, we're trying to take a stand and say, this kind of stuff is not okay. And so if you're gonna do business with us in this fashion, we're gonna trust each other, and you're gonna agree to these things, and it's gonna be enforced contractually. That doesn't mean it's never gonna happen, but there are contractual obligations to ensure that it's compliant.
So what do you think people, like the people who may not be very techy, but what do you think they should know about AI? What is something that you feel everybody should understand about AI? One thing, one message that you would like to say about it?
I would stop by calling it AI. Artificial intelligence feels like it is something you can plug in. Optimized human-assisted intelligence is a better one, in my opinion, because it then makes it very clear that a human has created this intelligence with the data, and it's been optimized over time, and also because the acronym is OHI. But
First of all, I would say you're using it already. Even if you think you're not, you are. If you're using any kind of device, you're using AI today. But also ask the question, if somebody offers you a service based on the data that you provide them, ask them who owns the data. It's a very revealing question. It's a very revealing question. Lots of people will dodge around it and try and talk about how they protect your data and the security of data, but stick to your guns and ask, who owns this data? That would be my advice.
It's good advice.
So in the world of healthcare, I think there's a big concern that artificial intelligence is going to further erode the relationship between the provider and the patient. The reality is right now, I would call the phase of technology integration in medicine like puberty. I mean, next time you go to your doctor, it's pretty awkward. There's a monitor usually set up between you and the physician. She can't see you around the monitor. Everybody's jockeying in a room that's too small. I mean, we're really in not a great time. And so I think the promise is that with tools that allow us to augment our skills, we're going to be able to improve that relationship and make it more meaningful and regain, I think, what people kind of, There's a lot of nostalgia around that sense of you and your physician really being a team. And I think that we can get back to that, where provider teams and patients can work seamlessly. The technology helps with that. So I think there's far more promise to improving that relationship than eroding it. And I think that's the biggest concern, and that's what I would share with people.
On the puberty stance, I mean, not on that stance, do you still have to use Internet Explorer like they do in the UK? The doctors there are still on IE.
No Internet Explorer for us, but I'll leave it at that.
So what was your acronym again? Optimized Human Intelligence Assistant?
Human-assisted intelligence.
Human-assisted intelligence. I like the word assisted, I think, because we do help the AI or human-assisted intelligence along. So with that in mind, what is your favorite, if we think of AI or OHI as being like this, powerful tool, what is your favorite AI OHI experience or tool or application?
Discover Weekly. Well, no, I would say Discover Weekly on Spotify. I love the fact, so it always generates a good playlist for me. And I love how they do it, because it feels like, oh my God, it's just created a playlist out of thin air. Like I enjoy the behind the scenes stuff, right? Like this is where it's the magic of technology, which does absolutely happen using algorithms behind the scenes. Like that's for sure.
So I would say, I think it's funny now, like if Netflix suggests something for me and I watch it and I like it, I'm like, oh yeah, good for me. I really did what they thought I should do. But I think in the world of medicine, we have a system that we're really proud of that we just implemented. That's a system that overlays our electronic medical record, and it helps us with operational support in real time. So it takes 3 years of back data, and then it looks at what's happening in RED in real time, and it makes predictions that allow us to resource appropriately. So for example, if the system thought that we needed to bring in an extra physician, it would give us a nudge to do that, and which is incredibly cool, because when you're working in an emergency department, none of us have time to sit and stare at a dashboard, and none of us have the awareness or the situational awareness to really gather in all the data to see what's happening. So the system can pick up cues forming with diagnostic imaging. It can tell us if a patient's been waiting too long and they're at risk to go home. So this kind of system's right in its infancy, but it is incredibly powerful. So that's what's really exciting for us right now.
Mine is I guess a personal answer, not so much of a corporate capability. I like a lot of the stuff that I see right now. I love this Apple Watch that can determine that I'm doing breaststroke and not front crawl in the pool, and I don't know how. I love the open ecosystem behind Alexa, where there's new skills and new capabilities that appear almost every day. But those devices unto themselves are not as exciting as what I see as the potential integration as part of an ecosystem between multiple devices that will participate collaboratively amongst themselves, right? So that if I have, let's say, a smart scale that can communicate its findings to my watch and then my phone, which understands my heart rate and circadian rhythms of the day, and then proactively opens up the Breathe app to say, now is your time to breathe because this phone call is making you crazy, right? That interaction between multiple devices and understanding the data that is going on relative to me is where I really see interesting futures for us. And I can see that. I hope the ecosystem continues to evolve in an open way so that this can become more powerful for everybody involved.
Does some of this speak to cybersecurity concerns?
Data. I mean, like if you've got all of your things speaking to each other, then yeah, for sure. But then it's trust, right? Like you've got to. There's a lot of. There's always going to be bad actors, and there's always going to be people that blindly trust things when they shouldn't. We all do it all the time. I do. I get told off by my CTO all the time for, why have you just installed this plugin? Because it said it was going to help me. Yeah, now it's probably going to have all your passwords. No, it doesn't. But like, there's you often it's the convenience side. You go with something because it's more convenient, but often actually because it's so convenient, they're doing that for other reasons. So yeah, making sure that stuff is tested, especially if it's the data and if you're so I don't know if it's the same over here. We have data controllers and data processors. Does that mean anything to anyone? Not really. Okay, so
Quality assurance and quality control.
data controller ultimately is the person who owns the data, and then a data processor is the person who processes the data and does something with it. So it's all part of our Data Protection Act of some year. Yeah, you have to say exactly how you're processing the data on behalf of the controller. And like that makes it clearer as to what you're doing with it, and how you're using that data. And I think we should, especially when it comes to consumer data, like when they are people that don't realize what they're doing, who are installing an app to do your, I don't know, tell you what Game of Thrones character you are, like I think there needs to be just better education around who you're giving your data to.
That's a good point.
I think in our controlled environment, I think the decisions are going to be made around value, like which applications and user cases really bring the most value. Because we don't want, medicine, we can't really have the Wild West. You can't be trying things all the time with people's data. I think there's a place for that in research, but we want to be really thoughtful about the value we're bringing. I think pretty strategic about it. And that's why I think partnerships between the healthcare sector and the technology sector is so incredibly important. Because without us sharing what we need, and without the technology sector telling us what they can do, we're not going to get to the best solutions.
I think Sid said it best. It comes down to trust, personal due diligence, education, and knowing where your data is.
I like this general theme that, as we go forward and aspire to a greater good, then we should do that collaboratively and resiliently and really with clarity and understanding. So 5 to 10 years, any kind of forecast, any possibilities to try and forecast?
5 years ago.
Yeah.
So to work out where we're going to be in 5 years' time, we need to look at what we were doing 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, Windows Phone was the new thing. Google Glass, we had Robert Scoble with the photo in the shower. All of those things, they were the future. So they panned out really well. So I always refuse to do a 5-year future cast.
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing. Do most people realize that Siri is 7 years old? So 5 years ago is not that old. It's not that long ago. And 5 years of Siri hasn't really shown us a whole lot of improvement from the very beginning. 5 years from now, are we going to see orders of magnitude of change? No. What I think we'll see is better manipulation of the data for those non-visible algorithms, better control of those outliers, better data science capabilities that are more automated to allow the existing AI capabilities to be more predictive. I know that's a boring answer, but I really think that's what's going to happen. I also think, and maybe we can mark this down, I think first level support is going to be bots. And you may not know whether you're talking to a bot or not. That's my guess.
Already is for a lot of our customers.
I think if you were to take kind of the outlying technology that's available now, and if it's deployed the way I think healthcare wants to deploy it, I think you'll see a pretty radical transformation in the next 5 to 10 years, just based on the technology that's available now and the willingness to put that technology into play. So I don't think it's going to be the Microsoft phone. But there's a lot of good stuff. Like I mentioned, this AI platform we're using in our emergency department, you put that in every emergency department across the world, and all of a sudden the efficiencies and what we learn from each other, and that's a very doable thing. So I think you're going to see, just because we're maybe so backwards, you're going to see a lot of progress. Not necessarily earth-shattering progress. I think it'll be iterative, but it'll sneak up on us, and we'll look back at this as a pretty transformational time.
So I think that's a wrap. Let's go out on the thought that AI is here for good and to augment and assist. And I really thank you all for your time and sharing your expertise.